That night, my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said word for word, "Either give your room to my parents or pack your things and leave." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply placed my napkin on the table, stood up, and walked to my room. The sound of silverware continued outside the door, precise and indifferent, as if nothing human had just happened. I folded my shirts one by one, slid the old leather suitcase from beneath the bed, and began to pack. No anger, no trembling. Only silence, sharp, deliberate silence. For 3 years, I had lived in that small room off the first-floor hallway, the one I helped renovate after paying off my son's mortgage. I thought I had found peace after my wife Helen passed. I thought helping Ethan and his wife Victoria would keep me close to family. I was wrong. When I stepped out of the house that February evening, the air was cold and clean. The orange tree by the porch still carried the faint scent of fruit, a habit left over from better seasons. I looked back once. Lights glowed through the windows. Inside, they were probably rearranging furniture, already claiming the space that had been mine. I took a cab to the Desert Crest Inn. The driver asked, "Rough night in lightning," I said. A week later, I moved into my new office across the street from their house. From the wide front window, I could see their dining room, clearly the same table where I'd been dismissed. I set my coffee on the desk, opened my laptop, and raised a calm hand in greeting toward the window. That was the first wave, the quiet beginning of everything that would follow. The silence in that dining room had been rehearsed long before that night. I could feel it the moment I stepped through the front door on Oak Street, a silence not of peace but of strategy. A silence people choose when they've already decided your place in their world. Victoria moved between the kitchen and the dining table with mechanical grace. She arranged plates and folded napkins as if she were performing for an invisible audience. 6 settings. I counted them twice. There should have been 7. "Evening, Victoria," I said. Her shoulders tensed. She adjusted a fork that didn't need adjusting. My son Ethan sat at the table, eyes lowered toward an empty plate. "Hey, Dad," he murmured, voice so faint it barely reached me. It was the kind of quiet that carries a hidden script. Everyone knew their lines except me. I had been living with them for 3 years in that house, 3 long, careful years after Helen's death. When I sold our old home, the emptiness was unbearable. Ethan had said, "Stay with us, Dad, just until you figure things out." So I moved in thinking temporary would turn into belonging, thinking family still meant something. Victoria's moods ruled the house like weather patterns, unpredictable, but always noticed. Some days warmth, other days storms. I learned when to speak and when to vanish into silence. But that February evening felt different. The air itself had an edge to it. The doorbell rang. Victoria's face changed instantly. Her frown vanished, replaced by a bright, performative smile. "Finally, they're here," she said. Then came the voices, cheerful, loud, oblivious. "Beautiful home you've got here," boomed Harold Mercer, her father, a large man with thinning hair and a laugh that demanded attention. His wife Elaine followed behind him, suitcase wheels clattering on the tile. "We just couldn't stand that guest mattress at the Hendersons," Elaine announced, already pulling Victoria into an embrace. I hadn't known they were coming. Ethan stayed seated, staring at his plate, as if it could explain the sudden invasion. "Hope you don't mind us dropping in," Harold said, slapping his hands together. "Gertie said it'd be fine for a couple of weeks." Gertie. That nickname, so familiar, so out of place in my home. Victoria laughed, brushing her hair back. "Of course, Daddy. You and Mom will be much more comfortable here." They rolled their luggage down the hallway like conquerors marching into occupied territory. Dinner that night was theater. Harold dominated the conversation, bragging about their bridge club and his HOA battles. Elaine nodded enthusiastically, adding details, embellishments, laughter. Victoria performed the role of attentive daughter. Ethan and I were ghosts at our own table. I finished my food without tasting a single bite. The tightness in my chest felt heavier than the air itself. Then Victoria stood. Her chair scraped the floor like a blade. "Dad," she said, not to me, to Harold, "we've got that perfect room for you on the first floor." Harold smiled. "The one near the window." "Yes," she said, then turned to me for the first time all evening. "My parents need a proper bedroom, Walter. That one downstairs will suit them perfectly." I looked at her calmly. "That's my room." Her eyes didn't flinch. "Then you can move upstairs. There's a guest room down the hall, without a bathroom." "Mother's knees," she snapped. She can't climb stairs. You understand. Ethan's fork froze midair. His lips parted, but no words came. This is my house too, Victoria continued. Actually, it's more mine than she stopped herself, but the damage was done. Harold and Elaine sat there saying nothing, basking in the authority she wielded. I stood up. The chair scraped again, loud in the quiet. I see, I said simply, and I walked away. In my room, I stood in the middle of the small space, my sanctuary, my exile. A bed, a chair, a few books, a framed photo of Helen smiling from another lifetime. I placed the photo face down. I opened the closet, took out the old leather suitcase I used to carry on business trips when I was still a financial consultant. I began to pack. Not in anger, not in sorrow, just precision. Each shirt folded with care, each motion deliberate. Through the thin walls I could hear them. Laughter, the clink of wine glasses, the shuffle of furniture being moved. This room will be perfect, Harold Elaine's voice sang. Much better than that awful one at the Hendersons. My hand stilled over a sweater. What I felt wasn't rage, it was clarity, the kind that freezes over emotion until it turns into resolve. By the time I zipped the suitcase, I knew exactly what to do. Family had turned into creditors of comfort. They had mistaken kindness for weakness and generosity for obligation. That night I called a taxi and checked into the Desert Crest Inn. The clerk didn't ask questions. The room smelled faintly of detergent and indifference. I sat on the bed, looked at my reflection in the mirror, a 67-year-old man still upright, still capable. I thought of Ethan's silence. I thought of Victoria's voice, sharp, triumphant, believing she'd won something. But she hadn't won. She'd only reminded me who I was before all the giving dulled my edges. I picked up my phone, opened my notes app, and wrote 5 words, "They will see who I am." The next morning, I ordered black coffee and opened my laptop. My financial records stared back at me, rows of transactions like silent witnesses, $180,000 mortgage payoff, $15,000 wedding, $8,000 for her car. Watch $200 monthly transfers for 3 years. A total of $246,200, all gone, all documented. I smiled faintly. Numbers don't lie. People do. Outside the hotel window, Phoenix sunlight poured across the parking lot, bright and impartial. By noon, I'd already begun searching property listings in their neighborhood. One caught my eye immediately. House for sale, Oak Street, directly across from 7821. The irony made me laugh quietly, steadily, like a man finally remembering his own reflection. The following days at the Desert Crest Inn passed with a strange kind of calm. The room smelled faintly of detergent and air conditioning, but to me it smelled like clarity. Every morning I made black coffee, opened my laptop, and studied the evidence of my own generosity. Each line in my bank statement was a memory disguised as a transaction. Every number carried a story that I had chosen to forget until now. $246,200. That was the total. I wrote it at the top of a page in my notebook and circled it twice. Beneath it, I wrote 3 words, "They owe respect." I wasn't thinking about revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't going to break anything, shout, or beg for apologies. I had spent my life calculating returns on investment. Now I was simply calculating a moral one. By Wednesday, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wasn't looking for a new start. I was looking for position, a vantage point. The kind of position that turns silence into power. The house across from theirs had been for sale for weeks. I'd noticed it before, but never paid attention. Now it felt almost designed for what I needed: 2 stories, a wide window facing their dining room, the same street, the same view. Only the perspective would change. I called the number on the listing. "Saguaro Realty, this is Olivia," a polite voice answered. "My name is Walter Grant," I said. "I'm interested in the property on Oak Street." Within 2 hours, I was standing on the front porch with Olivia Barker, the listing agent, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and the kind of handshake that measures character. She unlocked the door. "The owners are moving to California," she said as we walked in. "They're looking for a quick sale." The smell of vacancy filled the air, that faint blend of old paint and anticipation. Hardwood floors, a fireplace, an office with built-in bookshelves, and most importantly, a panoramic window that opened straight toward my son's house. I walked directly to it. Through the glass, I could see the dining room where Victoria had humiliated me. The same table, the same curtains. The space between our houses was exactly 30 yards. Perfect distance for vision, too far for excuses. Olivia was still talking something about updated plumbing and insulation, but I wasn't listening. My eyes were on that view. "I'll take it," I said. She blinked, surprised. "Would you like to discuss an offer first?" $650,000. Cash. 10-day close. Her brows rose slightly. "That's below asking, but with cash and no contingencies, they'll likely accept." "They will," I said. And they did. 10 days later, the house was mine. The renovations began immediately. I hired Javier Ortiz, a local contractor known for finishing projects fast. "You want this done in 5 days?" he asked, scanning my list. "Yes," I said. "The office first. Charcoal gray walls, oak desk, leather chair. I want the room to look professional, deliberate." He studied me for a moment. "You moving in right away?" "Yes." "And I'll need that window spotless." When the work was finished, I stood in the middle of the office, surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and new beginnings. The charcoal walls framed the panoramic window perfectly. From my desk, I could see their kitchen, their hallway, even the corner of the first-floor bedroom, the one that used to be mine. I moved in that afternoon with a single suitcase, a box of files, and my laptop. That was all I needed. Before unpacking, I brewed coffee, sat at the desk, and sent a single text to Ethan. "Moved into a new place. Across the street. If you need me, I'm close by." The message showed delivered, then read. For 10 minutes, nothing. Then across the street, I saw movement, a curtain shifting, a figure approaching the window. Victoria, her hair tied back, a coffee cup in hand. She froze when she saw me. I met her gaze, raised my hand slowly, and waved. She stumbled backward. The cup slipped from her hand. A moment later, Ethan appeared, drawn by her panic. She pointed toward my house, gesturing wildly. He looked confused, then spotted me. I waved again. Reflexively, he lifted his hand halfway before Victoria slapped it down. Even from 30 yards away, I could see the argument begin. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of coffee. The taste of control was subtle but undeniable. The next morning, I woke early, made fresh coffee, and sat at my desk again. The neighborhood was quiet, bathed in pale sunlight. At 7:45, Victoria left for work in her silver sedan. At 8, Ethan followed. The Mercers, her parents, shuffled around inside, visible through the windows, moving with the confidence of people who believed they owned the place. I began my work, real work, consulting, analyzing, planning. I reopened old investment accounts, organized my portfolio, and filled my days with purpose. Productivity, after all, is the cleanest disguise for revenge. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived at Ethan's door. I watched him sign for it. I knew what it said because I had written it myself with my attorney, Daniel Cho. Formal notice of debt repayment, $180,000 supporting documentation enclosed. Failure to respond within 30 days will result in legal action. The law, Daniel had assured me, was on my side. I had written records, emails, bank memos, and notes. It wouldn't be an easy case, but it would be expensive for them, and that was the point. From my window, I saw the moment Ethan opened the envelope. His shoulders stiffened. He called Victoria. She read the letter, her mouth forming silent curses. Harold appeared next, clutching his coffee mug, reading over their shoulders. It was beautiful, the choreography of consequence. That evening, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name lit up the screen. I let it ring until voicemail. Then another message arrived. "Dad, can we talk? Please." I deleted it. They needed silence now more than I did. For weeks, I kept to my routine. Work, coffee, observation. From my office window, I watched the Mercers grow comfortable in their stolen territory until the first signs of financial strain began to show. A missed grocery delivery. Fewer lights on at night. The absence of laughter. Every action has a cost. Every comfort carries a price. The day the process server knocked on their door, I didn't even look up from my spreadsheet. I just smiled slightly when I saw the blue envelope handed to Ethan. Outside, the world continued as usual, cars passing, sprinklers, ticking, birds landing on power lines. But inside that house, panic had begun to bloom. And across the street in my office with the charcoal walls and perfect view, I worked quietly, steadily, the way a man does when he knows that justice has finally come home. The process server left within 2 minutes. Across the street, I watched Ethan stand frozen in the doorway, the letter in his hand, his body still as if the paper weighed more than the debt itself. Victoria appeared moments later, her hair disheveled, eyes sharp. She snatched the envelope, tore it open, scanned the first page, and shouted something I couldn't hear. Even from this distance, I could read the body language: disbelief, fury, panic. Harold and Elaine Mercer joined them soon after, their silhouettes hovering behind the curtains. They argued in waves, Victoria pacing Harold, gesturing wide, Ethan sitting with his head in his hands. I closed the blinds halfway and poured another cup of coffee. I didn't need to watch the entire scene. The dominoes were already falling. That night around 9, my phone lit up again. Ethan, 9:03 p.m. Dad, please. Can we talk? Ethan, 9:07 p.m. Victoria's losing it. We can fix this. Ethan, 9:15 p.m. You're my father. Don't do this. I didn't answer. I placed the phone face down on the desk and returned to my financial reports. For 30 years, I taught clients that real power wasn't about wealth, it was about leverage. Money was only useful when paired with patience. Now I was proving my own theory. The next morning, I sent a single text to my attorney, Daniel Cho. Proceed with the next step. File the claim, he replied within minutes. Understood. Expect confirmation by Friday. I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting toward the window. Across the street, their curtains stayed shut until noon. Guilt sleeps late. When I finally saw Ethan step outside to collect the mail, his movements were slow, deliberate, as if he feared the mailbox might bite. Victoria followed, phone pressed to her ear, her gestures sharp and angry. They spoke briefly before she stormed back inside. The legal notice was only the beginning. I had mapped out phase 2 in a notebook weeks earlier, a strategy not of destruction, but of demonstration. My goal was never to ruin them. It was to teach them how easily comfort collapses when built on someone else's sacrifice. That weekend, I canceled the automatic $1, $200 monthly transfer I'd been sending to Ethan for 3 years. One click, one confirmation, and a lifeline quietly disappeared. The next payment day came and went. Silence, no message, no thank you, no complaint. But 3 days later, I saw Victoria standing in the driveway, phone in hand, pacing tight circles. Her movements were rigid, frustrated. She ended the call abruptly and threw her phone against the garage door. The sound carried across the street like a cracked note in a quiet song. Later, I learned what had happened. Her credit card had been declined at a restaurant, a small public embarrassment that spread through her body like poison. Pride always bruises faster than skin. Inside their house, the tension grew visible. Less light at night, fewer cars in the driveway. Harold and Elaine's visits to the porch now replaced by long arguments behind glass. One afternoon, I saw Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread before him. Bills likely. His expression was blank, the look of a man realizing how fragile his life really is when the safety net vanishes. I was at my desk typing notes when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, Ethan, alone this time, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. I opened the door. Ethan, he swallowed. Dad, we need to talk. I stepped aside. Come in. He looked around my house, taking in the clean lines, the calm order, the quiet. Everything about it seemed to unsettle him. You've been watching us? He asked, voice uncertain. No, I said. I've been living my life. The fact that you can see me from your window is coincidence. He didn't argue. He sat on the sofa, hands clasped together, elbows on his knees. We're drowning, he said quietly. The legal fees, the bills. I didn't know you'd really file that claim. You didn't know a lot of things, I said evenly. Like how much I gave or how easily you let them take from me. He winced. I was trying to keep peace. Peace built on silence is just slow defeat. He looked up, eyes red. I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll figure it out. I'm sure you will, I said, but that's not the point. Then what is the point? Dad, I met his gaze. To understand that generosity without respect is a mistake, one I won't repeat. He nodded slowly as if absorbing each word through pain. Please, don't destroy us. I'm not destroying you, I said, leaning back. I'm letting you experience balance. The world corrects itself eventually. I'm just speeding up the process. He covered his face with his hands. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. Then I remembered the night I packed my suitcase in silence while he sat at that same table saying nothing. Tell Victoria she can speak to my attorney if she has questions, I said finally. I don't negotiate with people who raise their voice at me. Ethan stood hesitant, defeated. I'll talk to her. Do that. He turned toward the door, paused, then looked back. Why are you doing this from across the street? Because every lesson needs a classroom, I said, and that's mine. When he left, I walked back to my office, set my coffee on the desk, and looked through the window. Across the street, Victoria was waiting for him. I watched her lips move as she questioned, accused, demanded. Ethan gestured back, trying to explain to calm her. She shook her head violently. The conversation dissolved into shouting. Harold and Elaine appeared soon after, stepping into the chaos like spectators at a fire they'd helped ignite. I took a sip of coffee and noted the time, 6:42 p.m. The storm had begun. That night I couldn't sleep, not from guilt, but from focus. Ideas flowed through my mind like currency. Every decision needed to be measured, timed, precise. The next phase would not involve courts or letters. It would involve silence again, the kind that makes people confront themselves. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook before turning off the light and the safety net. Wait for the cracks. When they reach out, listen, but never rescue. It was time to let gravity do the rest. As I closed the notebook, I glanced through the window once more. Their lights were still on. Figures moved inside, restless, anxious. And I realized something: this wasn't vengeance anymore. It was balance. For years I had carried them. Now they would learn how heavy their own lives really were. Tomorrow would begin phase 3. The next morning the neighborhood was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The hum of sprinklers and the distant sound of a delivery truck made everything feel normal. Yet nothing about Oak Street was normal anymore. Across the road, curtains stayed closed far longer than usual. It was 10:13 a.m. before the first light appeared in their kitchen. I was at my desk reviewing documents for a new consulting contract when I saw Ethan's figure appear in the window. He stood motionless, staring toward my house, then disappeared. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Ethan, we need to talk in person. Please, Dad. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying, if Victoria wants to join, she's welcome. 2 p.m. My house. At exactly 2:04. The doorbell rang. When I opened the door, they were both there. Ethan looked exhausted, pale skin, dark circles, shoulders drooping from the weight of weeks without peace. Victoria stood beside him, arms crossed, chin high, her defiance cracking around the edges. Come in, I said calmly. They entered cautiously, eyes scanning the space like visitors in a courtroom. My living room was minimal, deliberate oak furniture, soft gray walls, a single painting of a mountain range above the fireplace. Everything orderly, nothing excessive. Coffee, I asked. No, Victoria snapped. We're not here for coffee. Ethan shot her a warning glance, but she ignored him. This letter, this lawsuit, you can't be serious. I'm always serious when I sign my name, I said. You gave us that money, she shouted. Years ago, you said it was to help. I said family helps family, I replied. And I was family until I wasn't welcome anymore. Her lips tightened. You're punishing us because of one argument. One argument? I leaned back, slightly studying her face. No. I'm correcting years of imbalance. Ethan spoke then, his voice soft but steady. Dad, please. She didn't mean it that way. We were under pressure. Pressure reveals character, I interrupted, and that night your silence revealed yours. He looked down, shame cutting through his defenses. Victoria folded her arms tighter. You're really suing your own son. I'm filing a claim, I said evenly. It's not about money, it's about acknowledgement, and the law requires acknowledgement in writing. This is insane, she hissed. You're destroying your own family. No, I said. I'm saving myself from it. The silence that followed was heavy, tense, the kind of silence that strips away pretense. Ethan rubbed his temples. Victoria's jaw trembled slightly, though she tried to mask it. Finally, I stood. I think we're done here. My attorney's contact is in the letter. Any discussion should go through him. Ethan rose slowly, looking older than his years. Dad, please. Can't we fix this without lawyers? You can't fix what you refuse to see, I said. He hesitated at the door. You've changed, he whispered. No, I said quietly. I just stopped pretending your comfort was my responsibility. They left. The front door clicked shut with soft finality. I returned to my office, sat down, and looked through the window. Across the street, I saw them re-enter their house, the argument beginning almost instantly. Gestures, raised voices, the silhouettes of two people trying to assign blame rather than learn. I took a slow sip of coffee, feeling the calm settle back into my chest. This was not vengeance, it was accounting. The humankind. 2 weeks passed. The lawsuit paperwork reached their attorney, and within days their finances began to unravel. I saw the signs: fewer grocery bags, late-night discussions in dimly lit rooms, Victoria pacing with her phone pressed to her ear for hours. The Mercers, her parents, still lingered, contributing nothing, draining everything. They moved around the house like ghosts of entitlement, oblivious to the growing strain they'd caused. Then one Thursday morning, I saw Ethan's car pull into my driveway. He sat there for a full minute before knocking. When I opened the door, he looked defeated. "Dad, I can't do this anymore," he said. "The lawyers, the tension, it's tearing us apart." I stepped aside. "Come in." He followed me to the living room and sank into the sofa. "We can't afford a fight. I'm asking you to stop." "Please?" "I could," I said, pouring coffee into 2 cups. "But then you'd never learn where your peace actually comes from." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means comfort built on someone else's sacrifice isn't peace. It's dependency. And dependency is always temporary." He held the cup between his palms, staring at it. "I never wanted this to happen." "Neither did I said softly. "But we both made choices. You made yours when you watched me pack my suitcase." He shut his eyes briefly. "You're right." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I studied him for a moment, the same boy who once built model airplanes with me at the kitchen table, now a man learning the cost of his own inaction. "Victoria's losing her mind," he admitted. "My in-laws are draining us dry. She blames me for everything. I don't know how to fix any of it." "You start by taking responsibility," I said. "Not by fixing, but by facing." He looked at me, something new in his eyes, humility perhaps, or understanding. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to stand up," I said. "For once in your life, stand up and take control of your own house. Until then, the lawsuit stays." He nodded slowly, exhaling a long breath. "Okay." He stood, shook my hand, and left without another word. That evening, through my office window, I watched the storm break. The Mercers were packing. Harold gestured angrily while Elaine cried. Victoria shouted at Ethan. A suitcase fell. A door slammed. By sunset, the Mercers were gone. Ethan stood on the porch, motionless, staring at the empty driveway, long after their car disappeared. For the first time in months, I saw him alone. Not broken, just quiet. He went inside. Hours later, he reappeared in the window, pacing, then stopped and looked directly across the street toward me. I raised my coffee cup in acknowledgement. He didn't wave, but he didn't look away either. And in that moment, for the first time since that February night, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. My son standing like a man. The confrontation was over. The understanding had begun. But I wasn't finished yet. The lesson was only halfway learned. By mid-July, the Arizona heat had turned brutal, and the tension inside the house across the street had begun to match it. Even from my office, with the blinds half drawn and the hum of the air conditioner dulling the world, I could feel the weight pressing down on them. Every day followed the same pattern: Victoria pacing with her phone, Ethan sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by bills, arguments that rose and fell like desert winds. They were living inside a storm of their own creation, and all I had to do was wait. The lawsuit had done its work. Their attorney, a cautious man with expensive habits, demanded a $15,000 retainer before he'd continue. Their savings were already thin. By the end of June, the credit lines were shrinking, and the silence between husband and wife grew longer. On a Thursday morning, I saw Ethan sitting at his computer. His hands hovered over the keyboard for a long time before he pressed a key. I didn't need to guess what he was doing. I could see it in his shoulders, the hesitation of a man about to surrender. He was canceling their vacation. A week in San Diego, prepaid, non-refundable. $6,000 gone in a click. That evening, I saw Victoria at the kitchen table crying into her hands. Ethan sat beside her, saying nothing. The space between them looked wider than the street separating our houses. 2 days later, another symbol of comfort vanished. Their silver sedan, the one I had helped them buy years ago, when Victoria wanted something respectable for her new job, sat in the driveway. with a handwritten for sale sign taped inside the windshield. $18,000, firm. A younger couple came to test drive it the next morning. I watched the transaction unfold through my window. A handshake, a tight smile, the exchange of cash. When they drove away, Victoria stood staring at the empty space the car left behind. Her expression was blank, the look of someone realizing what luxury truly costs. Inside, the Mercers' presence had become unbearable. I saw them arguing with Ethan one afternoon, Harold's arms flailing, Elaine clutching her chest in melodramatic dismay. Victoria tried to calm them, but the argument only grew louder. By the next morning, suitcases appeared on their porch. The Mercers left without ceremony. No hugs, no lingering looks, just exhaustion and defeat. When their car pulled away, I closed my notebook and allowed myself the smallest of smiles. The balance was shifting exactly as planned. But victory, I reminded myself, isn't measured in suffering. It's measured in understanding. That afternoon, Ethan crossed the street again. His walk was slower this time, deliberate, stripped of pride. When I opened the door, he looked hollow, like someone who'd finally run out of excuses. "Dad," he said quietly, "I need to talk." I stepped aside. "Come in." He sat on the sofa, elbows on his knees, fingers pressed together. For a long moment, he didn't speak. "Then I'm sorry." The words were soft, but they filled the room. "I shouldn't have let her treat you like that. You paid off our house, you helped us with everything, and I let you get pushed out like you were nothing." His eyes met mine, red-rimmed but clear. "I've been weak." "Yes," I said simply. "You have." He nodded. "I know." He swallowed hard, then continued. "Can we fix this? Is there a way to make it right?" I studied him, the son who had once been too afraid to stand up for his own father, now finally looking me in the eye. "Perhaps," I said, but on new terms. "Anything," he said quickly. "Tell me what you need. I'll drop the lawsuit." I began watching his posture change with relief, but the financial help ends. Permanently. No more monthly transfers. No emergency checks. No invisible support. He nodded. "Okay, I understand. You and Victoria will rebuild your life on your own. If you can do that, maybe we can start again." "I want that," he said. "I'll make it happen. There's one more thing." He waited. "Victoria needs to apologize," I said. "Not to you. To me. Face to face. Not out of obligation, but understanding." He flinched slightly but didn't protest. "She's hurting right now," he said carefully. "But you're right. She owes you that." "I don't want a performance," I said. "I want truth. I'll talk to her." When he stood to leave, he extended his hand. I shook it firmly, not as father and son, but as two men closing a difficult deal. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said. "I never did," I replied. "I just stopped letting you take me for granted." He turned toward the door, paused, and looked back. "I'm going to make this right, Dad, however long it takes." "I hope you do," I said. He walked across the street, shoulders straighter than when he had arrived. Through my window, I watched him enter his house. Victoria appeared almost immediately, her movements sharp, defensive. She was shouting before the door had fully closed. Ethan stood still, then said something that made her stop mid-sentence. She stared at him, disbelieving, as if she'd just met someone new or someone she'd forgotten existed. They argued again, but this time Ethan didn't retreat. His hands rose, not in defense but in assertion. His voice, though muffled, carried through the air, controlled, steady, resolute. A lamp fell. A door slammed. Then silence. Hours later, lights glowed separately, her upstairs, him in the kitchen. Division by geography, not words. But even in that separation, there was growth. Sometimes you have to break something to rebuild it, honestly. I sat at my desk watching the soft lamplight in his kitchen. It flickered briefly, then steadied. I thought of Helen, my late wife, and the lessons she would have taught him if she'd been here. Patience, integrity, the courage to say no. He was learning now the hard way, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next morning, I took my coffee out to the porch. The sun was rising over the rooftops, painting the street in gold. Across the way, Ethan stepped outside, too, holding his mug. Our eyes met across the 30 yards of asphalt and history. He nodded once. I returned it. No words, no apologies yet. Just acknowledgement. It was enough. For now. Because I knew what was coming next. The final movement. The moment of truth. And this time the silence would belong to her. Late August brought a kind of quiet that Phoenix rarely knew. The air still carried heat, but the edges had softened. The world outside seemed calmer, or maybe it was just me. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for anything. I had nothing left to prove. That Tuesday morning, I was at my desk reviewing an email from a new client when I saw movement outside. Two figures crossing the street together. Ethan and Victoria. He walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm. Her posture was rigid, the body language of someone being led somewhere she didn't want to go. Even from a distance, I could see the conflict written across her face, pride fighting necessity. I closed my laptop and waited. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, Ethan stood tall, calm, composed. Victoria stood beside him, her arms crossed tightly, her eyes sharp but tired. "Dad," Ethan said softly. "Gertie," he stopped himself and corrected Victoria, "has something to say." She didn't move at first. Her chin trembled. I could see her jaw tighten as she forced the words through clenched teeth. "I'm sorry for how I treated you," she said finally, each syllable brittle as glass. It was wrong. I studied her for a moment. She looked different, not humbled yet, but cracked. Sometimes that's where light gets in. "I accept your apology," I said. She blinked as if expecting more. A lecture, a condition, a sting. But there was none. "That's it?" she asked, almost suspicious. "That's it," I said, then stepped aside. "Come in." They entered slowly, eyes wandering around the house they had once mocked. The calm, deliberate space seemed to unsettle her. The leather chair by the window, the clean desk, the smell of polished wood and quiet discipline. We sat in the living room. I reached for my phone on the coffee table, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. "Robert Cho," came the voice on the other end. "Robert, it's Walter. File the dismissal papers for the grant case today, please." A pause. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain." "Understood. I'll send documents for your signature within the hour." "Thank you." I ended the call and placed the phone down. "It's done," I said. Ethan exhaled a long, shaking breath, the kind that carries months of tension. "Thank you, Dad." Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came. Her face softened slightly, the first hint of understanding crossing it. I leaned forward. "Understand something, both of you. Things are different now. I'm not your safety net anymore. No more monthly help. No loans. No quiet rescues." Victoria started to speak. We never asked, but Ethan's hand on her arm stopped her. "Don't," he said quietly. She fell silent, eyes glistening, not with humility, but with the uncomfortable recognition of boundaries. I continued. "You're capable people. You'll figure it out. But from now on, what you build will belong to you, not to me." Ethan nodded. "We understand." "Good." I stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "You can visit sometime, when things are different, when they're real." He rose too. "They will be," he said. "I promise." At the door, he hesitated. His voice trembled slightly. "I'm glad you taught me this, Dad, even though it hurt." I smiled faintly. Some lessons only matter if they hurt. They crossed the street together side by side, not holding hands yet, but closer than before. There was something quieter in the way they walked, no arrogance, no performance, just the fragile beginning of honesty. I watched them until their door closed, then turned back into my house. For a long time I stood at the window, the same place where this entire story had begun. The street between us felt smaller now, not because the distance had changed, but because the power had shifted. I was no longer the father who needed a place in his son's home. I was the man who had reclaimed his own. Later that evening, the sky turned amber and rose, the last light spilling through the blinds across my desk. I sat down, opened my laptop, and typed an email. To Michael Reeves, subject Hamilton, account inquiry. "Michael, I've been considering a return to part-time consulting, nothing demanding, just a few select clients. I have an excellent office space now, and I find I miss the work. Are you still handling the Hamilton account? Best, Walter." I hit send and leaned back. When the reply came an hour later, it was short but warm. "They're still active and asking about you. Let's set up a call next week. Welcome back." I smiled. For the first time in a long while, it wasn't the smile of strategy, but of peace. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its nightly rhythm, porch lights flickering on sprinklers, clicking dogs barking in the distance. Across the street, I saw Ethan and Victoria in their kitchen talking quietly. No shouting, no gesturing, just two people beginning again. They looked smaller somehow, not diminished, just real. And me, I felt complete. I had spent months orchestrating silence, shaping consequences, forcing reflection. But it was never about their pain. It was about my restoration. Justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just sits quietly drinking coffee while the world corrects itself. I took a slow sip from my mug and watched the street fade into evening. Helen would have approved of this, I thought. She always believed in measured kindness and in boundaries that kept love honest. By the time the sky turned deep blue, I'd closed my laptop and turned off the desk lamp. My reflection in the window overlapped perfectly with the view of their home. My calm layered over their light. Two houses, two lessons, one silence that finally meant peace. Tomorrow I'd call Michael and start the Hamilton project. I'd fill my days with purpose, my nights with quiet. I had maybe 20 good years left, enough to live, to work, to breathe freely on my own terms. When I finished the last sip of coffee, I whispered to the empty room, not a vow, not a victory, just truth. I'm home.